Hello, I'm here with Aaron Sinek. I am Zach D. Roberts, here for episode 25 of the VisuNews podcast. This is WTHIGOC part 3. What the hell is going on in Chicago, Aaron?
Well, it's honestly a lot more like what the Hoff is going on in Chicago, as we are now seeing temperatures that are apparently colder than Antarctica. And I'm just going to say it's fucking cold. I'm wearing a hat indoors along with multiple layers, and it may or may not be 60 degrees in parts of my house.
I just want to make the reference now that off camera before the podcast I said, and it's like, oh, so you're Tim Pooling it, and he and Aaron very angrily corrected me with, actually he is who is it that you're that wears the cap?
The person that I think of more when I think of a skull cap indoors is Tim Armstrong from Rancid.
Much better,
because I'm an old punk, and that's what I do.
That is my profession. That is on my business card, old punk.
It actually, I will tell you, it was on a business card of mine once, because a friend of mine once printed off. Basically, I had posted one of the pieces of hate mail that I've gotten before a long time ago, where I was called among other things, a punk rock nostalgia keeper. And so a friend of mine made business cards for me that said that on them. So
Union Local 203.
And I think that would be Local 138, probably.
Oh, okay.
This fans will get that joke.
My buddy, who I do my entertainment podcast with, Russ Burlingame, has business cards for. He works at comicbook.com, and under his name for job description is Trend Pimp. Which is a Josie and the Pussycats reference, which I embarrassingly just drove down with him down to New York City to go to an Alamo Draft House showing of it. Literally, it's 4.5 hours from where I live down to New York City, and then 4.5 hours back. So I drove 9 hours yesterday, got back at like 6:30 in the morning to go see Josie and the Pussycats, which, holy shit, guys, if you haven't seen, I mean, I've seen it recently because it's like my friend's favorite fucking film. If you haven't seen it, I highly recommend it. It is not what you remember it being. It is actually one of the more like anti-commercialist films and anti branding and all that shit films you could fucking see with Rosario Dawson and Rachel Lee Cook in it. And if you're like me, a white male that grew up in the 90s, you'll have very many good memories of that time period, because it is the most, even though I think it was 2001 earlier, no, 2000, I think, it is one of the most 90s fucking films you'll ever see. But anyway, back to what the hell is going on in Chicago before I went on my long drift into memories of the late 90s. And it's fashion. What the hell is going on in Chicago, Aaron?
Well, there are a lot. there is always a lot. I mean, This morning, the Sun-Times published several stories about our that involve the never sort of ending unraveling of one of our city's most powerful aldermen, who has been in office for half a century, Ed Burke. There was another alderman who is an equally powerful alderman by the name of Danny Solis, who I don't even know where to begin to talk about this, because I didn't. I've lived here long enough. I've lived here my whole life. I've been doing politics here for a very long time, and as corrupt as I know a lot of these guys are, I never expected to see a story about an alderman who was wearing a wire as part of a federal investigation on another alderman, where it was revealed that the alderman wearing the wire was allegedly or possibly, trading political favors for various things, but at some of those meetings included people, swapping Viagra pills, massage parlors, where sexual favors were discussed.
As you went to explain, like the one of the related stories on the Chicago Sun-Times is a video, and the title is Viagra, Sex Acts, Use of a Luxury Farm, Feds Detail Investigation of Alderman Solis. And I was, what the fuck is a luxury farm?
Right, and I weirdly had to explain this to you, and that it's like, well, in the Midwest, there are farms that exist that are, just regular farms, but folks, and I'm assuming that's what I've been to one of these in Pennsylvania for a friend's wedding, where it was a working farm, or maybe still is, but it's like, oh, they have a barn that they turned into an event space, and there are many really great landscaped areas where you could take photos that are like wedding type photos or whatever, and there's also some animals on the premises that you could pet or whatever, but then there's a larger farm surrounding it, so there's actual farming work done. This is the sort of thing that I don't know if it's exclusive to the Midwest. I mean, I do know that there are. I mean, it's a luxury ranch, I guess.
The South has them. They just do them at plantations.
Yeah, where it's like rich people go.
Yeah.
Rich people go to quote unquote get back to their roots.
The North, we're just like where I live, we're just too poor to actually have luxury anything.
I mean, most people here are too, but there's always someone. There's always somebody who's got a bunch.
I'm sure that in the Finger Lakes for the vineyards and things like that, I'm sure that there's.
Yeah, I mean, there's also a wine ranch in Montana where both our now former Illinois Governor Bruce Rauner and current but outgoing Mayor Rahm Emanuel both went to. That cost something like $100,000 a year to be a member of.
Fun time.
So it's one of those things where it's like, this is the kind of thing where, again, rich, powerful people go somewhere, and these people, whoever owns the property has the ability to do this. But the issue is, of course, that it is alleged that this was a favor done, and at the same time, the property was owned by a developer, and so some favorable legislation came into various people's ways. And so, again, no criminal charges were filed against Solis, this particular alderman, because this was part of a bigger criminal investigation against different aldermen. And that was like literally the news I woke up with.
Yeah.
In addition to the fact that the news I went to sleep with, and the local news I went to sleep with and woke up with as well, was the fact that it is going to be it is literally going to be colder in Chicago in some places than the Antarctic, than Alaska. And our president, Donald Trump, tweeted just not even 24 hours ago, in the beautiful Midwest, wind chill temperatures are reaching minus 60 degrees, the coldest ever recorded. In coming days, expected to get even colder. People can't last outside for even minutes. What the hell is going on with global warming? Please come fast. We need you. Which is just a gross misunderstanding of how, climate science works, how climate change works. And is just like, I was aghast when I read this, and I didn't even know I didn't even know how to react, so I kind of didn't. But I can say that, and I'll send you the link to this story. But a really great Chicago journalist, Tony Briscoe, for the Chicago Tribune, did a story on how this happened and how this is possible due to climate change, which is something that the president actually ignores, or poo-poos or mocks or whatever. And so there are those things. And then, that's not even the end of it. That's like waking up at 7 o'clock in the morning with already this kind of stuff falling. And you're just like, okay, I'm kind of, I have enough here. I already have a lot of stories I have to write, but then, tied to the sort of climate change bit is, and I apologize, I'm trying to find the link that I sent you a while ago. But the fact that prison folks who've been incarcerated here in Chicago were spotted, and mind you, today and tomorrow, Tuesday and Wednesday, are going to be awful. We're gonna see temperatures we haven't seen since I've been alive, probably. But the past couple of days already here have been hovering about under 10 degrees with wind chills of far lower. And we have a situation here where prisoners, people in jail, are outside doing work in basically but orange jumpsuits, which so and these are inmates at Cook County Jail, and inmates at Cook County Jail, the majority of them are people who have not been convicted of anything. They are people who are awaiting trial, people who have bail that they can't afford to pay, that sort of thing. And they were working to clear snow. So these are people, again, for the people who say, oh, criminals, whatever. These are people who've been accused of a crime, but not actually convicted of anything.
So isn't there some amendment that is supposed to stop basically? Anyway,
you would think, but anyway, these are folks who were outside in orange jumpsuits like a day or two ago, which the spokespeople for Cook County Jail said that they were insulated jumpers and they take, quote, care of the inmates. Which no, that's just even no, that's not a thing. I mean, like I went to my corner store, which is across the damn street from where I live, and I was wearing 2 layers of pants, 4 layers of shirt, a coat, a hat, and all of that. So if you're outside working, no, that's just not no. It is. So, and you would think when you talk about what the hell is happening here in Chicago that's enough, but then no, it's not. Because we get to a story that's been driving national news for most of the day, which is horrific. Actor Jussie Smollett was brutally assaulted last night overnight, and it's become this sort of as the facts sort of shake out and as more things come to light, it's become this kind of thing where this person was the victim of a horrific racist and homophobic attack. And as the details have been shaking out, the far right, and in some cases not even people on the far right, have been basically saying, oh, this is fake news. Oh, it didn't happen like that. Oh, and there's all of these, just all of this shit that's coming out about this brutal attack, where folks are really trying to obfuscate any kind of details that happen. So that is 24 hours in Chicago. Not even 24 hours. That's what, 12 hours? I mean, it's 6 p.m. Central Time right now. I was up at 6 a.m. and this is the news that we've had. So that's what the hell is happening in Chicago right now.
And it looks like the FBI is taking over the case when it comes to Jussie Smollett. So it is probably been to some level more than just substantiated with eyewitness, but also now is, I would guess, then considered, it's got to be in the realm of the hate of actually being prosecuted as a hate crime, because I don't believe the FBI would actually take over otherwise.
No, I don't either. But I think we need to go back to sort of earlier today, as news was coming out. You had and you still have, and we will for the next God knows how long, until this disappears from the news cycle, which as we discussed last episode, the news cycle is extremely short at this point.
Yeah.
But you've got a lot of folks out here now who are saying, oh, well, Chicago is a liberal city, so this wouldn't happen here. Also, the CPD says that the way he described the situation didn't happen, and it's because people are not really sort of paying attention to the really, really minute details of things, and making broad generalizations about how things are reported and other type of stuff. And so earlier today, there were folks, there were sort of more right-leaning reporters and things like that saying like, what place is open at 2 a.m.? Well, this is the third largest city in the country. There are a lot of things that are open at 2 a.m. Who carries around the types of things that this this person was assaulted with, conveniently ignoring the fact that the first pardon me, the first couple of stories that broke this also detailed a threat that he had received a few days prior. And so there's just this sort of like overwhelming push to from right-leaning journalists to say, oh, well, there's no possible way this could have happened, and clearly he's making this up, or okay, maybe it happened but we don't have all the facts, or oh, by the way, what if this is some sort of false flag, or whatever. And it's that sort of deliberate obfuscation. And then on top of that, we have this situation here where folks are like, well, it couldn't have happened in Chicago anyway because it's a liberal city. And it's like, no, for as much as the right loves to paint Chicago as a bastion of liberalism, which they only do to sort of say like, oh, well, this is why there's so much violence or whatever. It's like, we were home to, I'm assuming most listeners have seen the Blues Brothers and remember the scene of the I Hate Illinois Nazis scene. And, that is deeply rooted into how Nazis used to organize here on the South Side back in the 70s. Yeah. In the 80s, we were the first city in America to have the first organized group of Nazi skinheads. Yeah. We just last election, or during the 2018 primary, rather, we had, a guy who was, ran the fucking local Nazi party run on the Republican ticket. So there is no way, and the way that this is being done is to sort of obfuscate what actually happened, which is that a person of color, a person who's part of marginalized groups, was brutally attacked, and it's entirely it's entirely possible, the way that some of these things shake out, by people who are horribly racist and homophobic. And the sort of like right-leaning crowd is like, well, we had nothing to do with it, it's not possible. And the thing is also, there's a lot of nuance in how this comes out as far as reporting goes, which is that, according to Chicago police spokespeople, in the initial interview, Smollett said that the attackers had concealed their faces. But that is the initial interview after and I can't believe I'm even actually having to say this, which is that This is the initial interview after an attack.
Yeah.
Of course, there are many follow-ups because
also this is the initial interview after the attack and the information that was released to the public, like, which is like, I literally, like, when I'm home, I watch a little bit of a little bit of the news, MSNBC, just to see what I'm supposed to be angry about, which is usually the Russia investigation or something. And then I switch to Law and Order. And but to me, I go, if nothing else, one of the more popular shows in American television history should prove to you that the police don't always tell the news media and people everything that was talked about in an interview, because it's a bad fucking idea. And it always just amazes me that whether it be rape cases or whether it be, I mean, it's almost always in a rape case, it's like, well, she forgot, she conveniently didn't say that her attacker had said this or did this or something. Oh, well, clearly everything must be doubted then.
Yeah, I mean, well, and the other thing too is, again, when various law enforcement elements or, journalists, news media, I mean, whoever is investigating things, of course, people doing multiple follow-up interviews is just standard procedure, because of course something traumatic literally just happened 20 minutes ago. And you're firing off all the information that you can.
Yeah.
And one of the biggest sticking points, and again, I can't believe that I actually have to go through this like literally, bit by bit, is he did not tell the cops in the very first report. And mind you, this is the report that CPD is giving people, which is a thing that should be suspect in the first place, given the long and very long relationship, many things that we've discussed on this podcast regarding law enforcement in general, but saying that, additionally, in their initial report, Smollett didn't tell the cops his attackers yelled, this is MAGA country.
Yeah.
But the information officer also added, I'm not saying that's not true. He could have remembered that. He didn't tell them that in his initial report, which in the follow-up report and supplemental interview, he did in fact tell police that. And then in addition, again, this is a person who contacted police and was wearing a rope around his neck that these fuckers put around his neck. And so, it's one of those things where, like, you have a lot of people who don't know how journalism works, who don't know how reporting works, who don't know how investigations work, who really just want to find, some sort of hole to plug in any story that might implicate, what they've been up to. And or strike that, but you know what I mean, like implicate anything that they say is totally impossible or totally whatever. And again, also you have a lot of people who are weighing in on Chicago, again, happens regularly, on, oh, well, how could anybody be walking in that area?
Well, that's actually, I mean, this is actually kind of this is an important detail because much like Covington High and all and kind of all of these, anytime there's a viral moment, you have basically the 4chan Reddit investigators, which have a fantastic track record, if we remember the Boston bombing, of trying to uncover
Charlottesville.
In Charlottesville, obviously,
among everything in between.
Yeah, and everything. It's just literally like naming and basically having people show up to somebody's fucking house, sort of thing. But the fact that they're trying to use these, like, what explain to me, this is like kind of an important Chicago thing, like explain to me the subway portion of it, because I mean this is something that they try, be like, whoa, subway's not working, or something in that within that block.
Hang on. No. We're talking about Subway, the restaurant chain. We're not talking about the mass transit system.
Wait, what?
Okay,
like,
I'm sorry.
I'm literally reading some of the, just like briefly reading the tweets, and this is how ridiculous this is. Wait, what?
Okay, hang on 1 second here. The reports. I don't even know.
By the way, there things are breaking as we're recording this. So
no. I just want to make it clear that when we say subway, we are talking about this is our chance to sorry. I just want to make it clear that when we talk about when we're saying subway, we are saying that he was walking home from a subway with a capital S.
Yes.
And that is the weird part is that has become this sort of sticking point for people who want to be like, well, this is fake news, it's made up or whatever. There isn't a subway there. We're not actually talking about the transit system, because if we were talking about the transit system, we would, in Chicago, we would say the L. We would say the CTA. That's actually how we refer to things here. We call it the L. We call it the CTA. Yes. That's thing number one. Thing number two is that the question is, well, what subway is open 24 hours or whatever? There is literally one in the neighborhood that this person was attacked at that is open 24 hours. There are also several others that are open very late at night and throughout the city of Chicago.
And throughout America.
And throughout America, throughout many larger cities. A lot of fast food chains, which is what Subway is, are open 24 hours. That's just how living in that's how things work
in civilized cities.
You won't catch me say that. And I know
I'm sorry. I'll say it. I live in a rural area that literally everything shuts down at 8:30. And the local literally our convenience store is the only place to literally get a cup of coffee or anything after 8:30 without going to the Walmart, which their food, their Subway actually does shut down. And
I'm assuming you'd have to drive. I'm assuming you'd have to drive to it and not walk to it.
Yes. No, it's even in our balmy 25-degree weather that we're having here, I would probably freeze to death if I walk the 20 miles that it is to the local Walmart.
But then the third part, is the fact that and I'm just going to read from the from a CBS local CBS article, which is that police said the victim was walking home from a subway in the 300 block of East Lower North Water Street around 2 a.m. And so there were a bunch of internet investigators who were like, there isn't a subway under on Lower North Water Street. No, there isn't. But again, walking from, meaning that he exited, because when police do these kinds of interviews, and when you interview someone about these things, they're talking about where the attack happened, and then they also wanted to know where the person was coming from, which was this place. And so what's happened is that all of these little tiny minute details that seem like, they're minute details, become extremely important, because every single one of those is like, oh, well, obviously this didn't happen, because of course you can walk under, in that very specific area under there. But also, that there are a bunch of parking garages down there, which why would this person be walking down there? Well, there are parking garages. There are hotels that are above that. This is a place that this is, mind you, by the way, a very, very ritzy. This is where tourists and celebrities and other people stay. This is a hotel district. This is. And so the idea that this couldn't happen because XYZ is just complete nonsense. But I think a lot of it is because, people look at this and they'll just type 300 East Lower Water Street.
And then do a Google Maps
into Google Maps and be like, oh, well, there isn't a subway right in front of the door. But again, that's not, and it's I don't even know how to.
Well, I mean, that's even lowballing, because I mean, like, God forbid, as I recommend on every podcast I do, don't read the comments. But I'm always fascinated on breaking stories, on looking at the immediate responses to things, especially when there's a racial or hate crime style attack, and reading, because there's always either it's the why did the guy run from the police, or oh well, clearly it's and all those different things, but there's already the massive number of people going on a thread by a guy named by Rob Elgas, who's with ABC7, which it literally says it in his fucking handle, is literally going, well, where did you get this? I don't see any record of you need to link to where the police said this. And it's just amazing. This is one of those things that amazes me in breaking stories, where people don't understand that there may not be a published account of it yet, because the journalist that got the response is fucking tweeting about it, as opposed to writing up a post to go on the website. And also, police don't usually post, don't often post their official statements on their website or something like that.
The thing is, police do. Police accounts do tweet and they do post official statements, but they don't do it like it's breaking news. I mean,
and nor should
you can go through the Chicago police Twitter feed, and there's like 2 posts a day or whatever, and a lot of it is it's not related to every crime that happens, and that's why reporters exist. But that's also why reporters call them, and they have spokespeople, and that's why the person saying like, where did you hear this, that particular reporter literally says, I spoke with a rep from CPD. And so it's a matter of people believing that, like, it has to be, if they don't agree with it, there must be something that there must be something that exists on the internet, corroborating it, even though this reporter's report from his conversation with CPD officials is a thing on the internet. That's not good enough. And that is because, that is because of the sort of way that I think, the right has dealt with, dealing with news in general. And that goes all the way up to however high a level you want to put it, which is that anything that refutes the narrative they want to sell, they're like, well, this is fake because this is fake because that. And it's like, dude, this is a beat reporter. There are a lot of beat reporters on this, and these are people who report here every day. And the folks who are, spreading the sort of worst rumors about this are people who don't live here, who,
course, as always,
who aren't from here, who aren't journalists, who aren't people who talk, who do this kind of reporting every day. And, this is kind of the sort of, this is the InfoWars. This is how, InfoWars and all of that sort of has corrupted, news reporting in general, which is that it's like, oh, well, you know what? I'm going to make a claim as well. I'm going to provide zero evidence. I'm not on scene. I'm not from there. I don't actually work there. But I'm going to make a claim on YouTube or on Twitter or on whatever. And, oh, well, if you can't prove me wrong, then obviously I'm right. No,
I mean, I've enjoyed the because anytime that I post on Twitter about the DeAndre Harris attack from Charlottesville, there's about a dozen or so Twitter warriors who will pull up this one highly edited video clip that happened before DeAndre Harris's the attack that happened on him, that proves that DeAndre Harris instigated the attack, which, even if this wasn't a highly edited video and whatever, somehow the fact that he pulled a flag away from somebody or something justifies him getting beaten half to death by 6 to 7, 6 to 8 fucking white dudes, whatever. But it's amazing when it's because I used to argue and just be like, no. And now I go, I was there. You were not.
Right. I
witnessed the video that you're showing, and I witnessed the following attack, and I was there beforehand. I have more information than you do, which is something I kind of wish that I obviously understand why, like, especially beat reporters and that sort of thing, like working for ABC7 or whatever. I just really wish they would kind of just start doing them. Like, I have more information than you. I'm here. I'm physically on the scene. I have talked to police. I've talked to witnesses. I know more than you do. And which is, it's something that weird that like can't happen anymore. Unless you're like Neil deGrasse Tyson, who gets to be, an asshole on Twitter about, movies or whatever. It's like, you can't, no, but it's like, I kind of wish that reporters would be, I get it. Like, I get why we can't be, because we have to kind of build this weird, relationship with idiots, who refuse to recognize that there are people who are smarter than other people. And I recognize that there are people that are smarter than me, and that have more information than me about other subjects. But like, there are certain very specific things in life that I have all of the info. Like, no one other than there's one other person. There's about 6 or 7 people who have more info than me, say, about DeAndre Harris being attacked. That is DeAndre Harris. And that is the 6 people who attacked him. Those are the only people who have more information than me. Like, everyone else wasn't paying attention to it, and so it's always amazed me that, but there's other subjects that go, well, there's a videographer, especially when you're a videographer or photographer. It's like, I have video. I was watching the video and I was physically there. And it always surprises me that we don't, I guess it doesn't surprise me, but is that I just do wish that we could just occasionally go, you're wrong. And you don't know what the fuck you're talking about. And, right. But yeah.
Anyway. So there is that, but then there's also, something that comes out, because of course, and I deal with this on a regular basis as well, because, everyone, and in fact, if you go back to our first rendition of what the hell is happening in Chicago, our first episode of the first subset of episodes of this podcast that we did that were just all about Chicago, were because the president, who is a person who isn't from here, who has really never spent any time here, who owns some property here, but has never been anywhere in our neighborhoods and all that kind of thing, loves to bash Chicago as a place that's horribly violent and terrible. And, of course, that's the fault of Democrats and whatever. But, so as a person who's lived here my whole life, I constantly deal with, people telling me how things really are here. And I'm like, yeah, I actually live on the South Side. I live in the city. I live on the South Side. I report on things from all over the city. And you, person who is not from here, or even in some cases, people who are, just don't see the same kinds of things I do. And this is my actual job. But that is, I think, sort of a bigger, larger tactic, which, we could go on for hours about, which is just about basic media literacy. And then also, how propaganda works, and, so, and how the far right propaganda machine works, which is that, of course, all journalists are terrible and untrustworthy and whatever when they're reporting something that looks, that appears to make us feel negative. But the second something else happens, and I think this is really important, and it seems it might seem unrelated to some folks, but I think is related, is that VDare today published a letter from someone who called from a person who says, a reader fears what will happen to political prisoner James Fields in jail. James Fields is the person who drove a car into the crowd in Charlottesville,
Yes.
and literally murdered someone.
Yeah.
And there are so many folks who are trying to, like you were talking about DeAndre Harris, the narrative from the far right is that, Heather Heyer didn't die from being hit by a car, she died of a heart attack. And that, and so these things are all connected, and I think that's sort of something that needs to be talked about, which is that over the past few years, your larger sort of folks used to say your centrist media and your right-wing media or whatever, and even various forms of leftist media would say, well, these things aren't really related, these are fringe groups, whatever. It's like, no, fascism and white nationalism have pretty much, and we could argue that they always have been in charge of things, but they have really taken over how reporting is done. And so when a person of color is attacked, when something happens to someone like that, immediately any details are always suspect. But when some kids from a high school surround a Native American elder and yell at him, people are immediately saying, well, we don't understand everything yet. And so the bias in reporting on all of these things leans to the right. It completely leans to the right. And that makes it difficult to report on anything, because of course there is going to be a machine. There is a machine that exists to cast doubt on any reporting that does not line up with that agenda. And I think that actually even there's a tie-in there to the fact that even Fox today was talking, had called out Trump for basically shit talking them and bullying them because they didn't do, because Fox said something not even negative, but it's like, that is how, when you want to talk about how far right this country has moved and how far right media has moved and how much power the right has in media, that's where we're at. And yet they still push this narrative as if there is some sort of left-wing conspiracy. And that skews all reporting in so many ways, because you literally have to defend, not only your reporting on the ground, which is like, hey, I'm there, I'm shooting this video, I'm shooting these photos, I have audio recording of these quotes, I was present for this event, here are quotes from even here are quotes from CPD, here are quotes from these sources or whatever. You have to defend all of that to some person who's like, well, I think it happened differently, I have no evidence for this, but I made, I posted something on Reddit or whatever, and you can't prove me 100% wrong, so it must be 100% true. And that's where we're at.
Dear Lord, sorry. And I suppose we could get into the let's just let the Covington kids go away. So, because that was literally going to be, the next thing we kind of fade into, and it's just, I don't know. I mean, I personally am getting a little tired of.
Well, I mean,
you know?
it's one of those things where, like, these are folks who, they see themselves as the victims, even though we've already seen the stories that have come out subsequently from that situation that explain much more. But they've conveniently skipped over that and have already gone into, like, oh, well, we're going to sue anybody who talks, who's reported anything differently from the way we say that this happened, which is not the way that it actually happened. But that's irrelevant. And that's the thing. That's how intimidation and that's how propaganda work, and that's how intimidating journalists works. And that is the sort of place that we're in, where you can, I have this report, I have this information, whatever, and someone who is powerful or connected to powerful people immediately says, well, no, actually this thing happened, and they've got a whole group of people who are going to say, yes, this is how this happened. Also, I do need to say that though, which is good, and again, why we're talking about breaking news literally as this is happening, as of 15 minutes ago, which it is 6:28 Central Standard Time at this recording.
I believe we actually call it WTHIGOIC time now.
Yes.
What the hell is going on in Chicago?
What the hell is happening in Chicago time? Earlier, as we started this podcast, we had mentioned that the FBI took over the investigation of the Smollett case, but 15 minutes ago, CPD said that the investigation actually remains with Chicago police. So that is another thing that is, sort of worth talking about, which is that these sort of details are very, very important into any kind of reporting. And they can be cherry picked later, which is to say, oh, well, you're fake news because you reported this. And I'm like, no, man, I'm reporting this chronologically. And that's sort of what we're doing right here. In a way.
Well, I mean, and this is this weird thing is where it's just like this, all of this used to happen, and I think it's a discussion worth having at some point, is, most of this used to happen behind the scenes, because there'd be a daily in some cities 2 times a day newspaper. And so you would see basically the finished product. You wouldn't see the reporting in real time. You wouldn't see the evolution of it. And something that, like, I try to stay away from in my reporting. I just don't like tweeting out as I find out things or talking about things as I go along, which I know a lot of people have made, a lot of very good journalists have made a career doing. And I think it has its pluses and negatives about talking, especially like an investigation, talking about an investigation as it unfolds live. But I personally like to stay with, like, I don't like printing until I know everything. At least everything that is possible of knowing by the time I can print, but by the time I have to print. And that's that's super one of my lucky things one of the reasons I love working with Nation of Change is the fact that they only after I remember doing a couple different stories after Charlottesville, and it was like 3 or 4 days on, and they were like, hey, any chance we can get a story about that after Charlottesville? And I was just like, yes, no, I'll finish it as soon as I can. And they didn't pressure me like, get it out immediately. We need those clicks. Because I was finding out information as everything went on, not only at what happened overall at Charlottesville, but specifically what happened and what I saw. And I had to, confirm with other reporters that I talked to and confirm with the activists on the ground and find out what the police were saying. Not that they gave a flying fuck about basically anything. But it is, it's something of a luxury that anyone gets to basically take their time on especially a quote unquote breaking news style story that's not like a long form investigation. And I get that there needs to be reports out and that sort of thing, but I'm like, I have a great luxury being able to take my time and not having to, correct things as I go along.
Right, because that's part of because that's part of how we do the job of reporting, is that you get information, then you have to fact check it, then you have to correct it, then you have to do all these things. And the interesting thing, of course, is that from when you look at the way the right reacts to news stories, is that that applies when it's something that involves Trump, or something that involves them, or something that involves Republicans. But in the same basket, if it involves anyone on the left, it's like, oh no, yeah, of course, Democrats are running, a criminal, ring out of a pizza place in fucking, DC. Like, that's irrefutable. And it's one of those things where, I realize we've gotten into like a sort of more in the weeds discussion of how journalism works, but that's the kind of thing that needs to be discussed, because like, I'm a person who does report, on the ground from either press conferences here or protests and whatnot. And I do a lot of that on Twitter as it's happening. But then I go back and write a story later. And it's because, of course, live, as things happen, if you've got live footage or live anything, it should be coming out, but you have to note what's live versus what's happened later. And I think with that particular incident in DC that we were discussing earlier, there was something that happened where the right found the perfect moment. The people who wanted to push a specific narrative found the perfect moment, and they were like, oh, well, yes, obviously these people are victims. And then they've ignored all of the reporting that's happened since. And that is the dangerous part about that is how propaganda works. And how this sort of thing works, which is that, like, oh, well, yeah, we found our thing, we could just use that thing, and we're just going to ignore anything that happened afterwards, because obviously that's fake too. And that's it. And then we move on, and then everyone moves on, because the cycle is so short. And we discussed this at length in our last episode. So not going to rehash it, but
so
I mean, suffice to say, this is a terrible thing that happened, and details are still coming out. But I think the sort of the one takeaway that you can make is that racism and homophobia aren't things that disappeared, and the fact that there are a lot of people who want to ignore that have ignored decades of history, and have literally ignored everything that's been happening for the past couple of years. Not only decades of history, but just the things that in front of their own faces. And that's sort of the difference, which is that, of course, as a journalist, as a photographer, as a documentarian, as a writer, as a person whose job it is to document things, you do notice trends. And the fact that there is a narrative out there that's like, oh, well, racism doesn't exist, or, well, oh, racism is only Democrats, or whatever.
Or even on the flip side, racism only exists in the South. And that, there's no way there could be MAGA hat wearing people in Chicago. I mean, I've seen the same thing. People like on my Facebook feed talking about, have you ever seen I've never seen a MAGA hat in New York City. And I go,
oh, really?
I have a lot.
Wait, someone actually, like, I mean, that to me sounds as preposterous as someone
I
saying,
mean, personally, they just maybe never saw one.
right.
I was just like, no. I mean, obviously, probably even New Yorkers who might actually wear a hat probably won't wear a hat just in general because they don't want to get fucking heckled.
Well, were there any of those Proud Boys wearing
Oh,
those
Proud
hats?
Boys would wear them. I mean, at the it was 2016 or 2017, I forget. I was down for May Day protest, and there was a counter protest with a bunch of people who I know who are New York City residents because they're continually at every protest, counter protesting they can possibly do, wearing their Make America Great hat and everything. And so it certainly exists. I mean, it certainly even exists outside of Staten Island, which is basically the Mississippi of New York City. No offense to Mississippi, I apologize. But
I was just about to say that.
I know, and I know many people now in Mississippi, and there are many good people in Mississippi. I was just making a joke.
No, I mean that's the thing.
I apologize to the people of Mississippi for comparing them to Staten Island, which is a cesspool. Yes.
I don't think I've been in New York. I don't think I've been to Staten Island, so I can't actually argue either way on that.
It's basically the portion of the city that continually elects, elected Rudolph Giuliani for 2 terms, and then gave us begrudgingly Michael Bloomberg. Even though, again, and that's one of those things that always surprises me that people have these imaginations that a lot of these, like Chicago and New York are these, left-wing socialist, things. I mean, yes, de Blasio just made some statement about, oh, we're going to have, basically medical care for people who can't afford it in the city. But we're at the still time, it's essentially a police state. New York City is, where Black and brown people and journalists get beaten up, arrested, and no one gives a flying fuck. We still have essentially de facto stop and frisk that will never fucking end because the NYPD will never stop doing it, no matter how many orders they get. And it's still, the center of fucking New York City, at least, is the center of, commerce, where all right-wing policies birth from, outside of, the Koch brothers in Wichita, those 2 spots. And so, I mean, Chicago is the Chicago School of fucking economics.
Well, yeah,
Certainly not a liberal. No, I mean, like, obviously, no, but I mean, it's, it's this wild idea that, like, these, larger cities don't have I mean, I spent the last 2 weeks down in Southern California. Spent a day in Tijuana, and I've been talking to and working on a story about basically the right-wing groups that exist in Southern California that have attacked or gone after, in general, migrants and just, not even like the militia, what was it, the Minutemen that were along the border, mostly in Arizona. I think it was Arizona, New Mexico, and obviously there's a bunch of individuals who do things in Texas and other places. But even in the radical left that is Southern California and California in general, there's massive problems. I mean, one of the only person that I actually did an interview with at the Charlottesville Tiki Torch March was actually from the Bay Area. That was the only person. And you can find that internet. You can find that guy on the VisuNews. I think it's on the VisuNews. Should be on the VisuNews YouTube page. You can find that interview. And obviously, he gave his first name, which I'm blanking on the moment. For some reason, I'm picturing it's Chad, but it can't be Chad.
It very well could be, but no. I mean, the thing is, you're right in something that was pointed out. I did a Twitter thread, which I've already talked about here, which was just about how, people say, oh, this couldn't happen in a liberal city like Chicago, that details, literally the history that goes back to, decades. But one of my former editors, added the fact that it should be stressed that Chicago Democrats, many of them who still have power, are socially conservative, and that plenty of them would be in lockstep with GOP positions on abortion, church and state, law and order. And that is a thing that is 100% true. I mean, when we talk about the 3rd district here, which is the person who ran on the Republican ticket for the 3rd district, is an actual Nazi. The guy, the Democrat that eked his way out in the primary was a person who did support right-wing, GOP positions on abortion and gay rights and things like that. And that the fact that there are a lot of powerful people and powerful families here that go back generations, and Chicago has always been the most segregated city one of the most segregated cities in the country, and that is by design. And pointed out by another journalist to me was that that feeling where Rahm Emanuel is the liberal, and that is a person. I have this whole series I'm doing for Shadowproof about folks who are finally might have a chance in our upcoming election to elect someone who is not the type of quote unquote liberal that Rahm Emanuel is, which is, a neoliberal who is still fucking with poor people and giving all the money to rich people. But you have to give, like, even I, who I've been a critic of Rahm Emanuel for as long as he's been in office, I have to give him at least some modicum of credit for the fact that he showed up when Nazis were rallying in Skokie or Marquette Park. I forget which rally he showed up to, but he showed up to actually fight fascists. And granted, that was back, that was a couple decades ago, but to say that, like, oh, well, because this place is a city, or this place is a quote unquote urban environment, or this place is controlled by Democrats, is therefore liberal, and therefore these things would never happen, is total and utter bullshit. And I think that's it.
Sorry, I'm a little low key today. I'm a little burnout.
I've been burnt out for 2.5 years, man. So have you.
Yeah, no, I quit drinking for a while, so I don't have the edge, the blurry edge that allows you to go through, and it's just been one of those, like, it's
No, it's hard. I mean, and that maybe is a whole other podcast, which is just self-care, dealing with the rising tide of fascism, or the risen tide of fascism under late stage capitalism.
I always just go or just dealing with the Trump 20, as I call it, which is you have the freshman 15 and you have the Trump 20, the 20 pounds that almost every person that I know has gained during the Trump administration from self-caring the fuck out, basically. Like, when it comes to booze, or when it comes to, it's gonna be like, well, I'm just gonna have that extra bit of ice cream or whatever. Oh fuck, actually ice cream sounds really good right now. But
maybe to you it does, but it's also, I think I think it's dropped down to
too cold for you. Too cold for ice cream. Sorry,
a little bit. I mean,
I
was saying on the last episode that I am a person who will literally go to another place and wear shorts when it's 50 degrees, but at the same time, it is now, it's now about 1 degree. Oh no, I'm sorry. It's 0 degrees here in Chicago. So ice cream sounds terrible right now. I'm just gonna say
I like ice cream, whether it's cold or warm or whatever. I've sat out in when I lived in Alaska, drinking some like literally frozen wine and having a thing of Ben and Jerry's out on the porch, chatting with my friend Shannon Moore, and when it's like -25, and you're like, oh, you're wearing gloves and full down. I'm literally wearing like under everything, and still having ice cream because it is a fantastic thing. But
well, maybe once it's supposed to be a balmy, I think 10 degrees on Thursday, so maybe I'll have some then. But climate change isn't a thing. We wish we had global warming and all of that nonsense.
Yeah, true.
Because that's the world we live in. Because that's how disinformation and misinformation works. And I think that was the point of this, right?
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, I think so. I mean, we're a little meandering. Not that, that's not something we do often. We always that's one thing we like to do in the VisuNews podcast is stay right on point and stay on track.
Yes.
And not get distracted by pretty colors. Ooh,
blue car.
Ooh, piece of candy.
Man, that's two cartoon references there.
Yes. Yes. James Woods, the man who literally blocked me on Twitter because I said it's weird that James Woods reminds me of his character on Family Guy so much. And then James Woods responded, "You idiot. I voiced that character." And then I responded, "Oh, I know." And then he blocked me.
That's the joke.
And I was like, wait, no, you're a fucking asshole. That's what was the point. But yeah, anyway. Yeah.
Well, we've definitely made a few enemies with this show.
Come on, Covington high school kids, come at us. Sorry. But anyway. I ain't got nothing, so you can sue me. I don't give a shit. But
can't give blood from the stone, man.
Exactly. So, Aaron, where can people find you?
You can find me on Twitter at Aaron Cynic, on Instagram at Aaron Cynic, and on the internet at large at aaroncynic.net.
I've always wanted somebody, whenever I say that at the end of a show, and be like, well, you can find me at 123 Main Street. You can find me mostly on Tuesdays at the Starbucks, but sometimes
you can you know what, I will say you can find me from time to time at various Southside bars in Chicago, but you're gonna have to figure that out on your own.
Yes. Look for the man in the snow cap. But
and trench coat.
And trench coat. And also no pants. But that's a whole different story.
Hey, no, it's pants season now in Chicago. Whenever it gets this cold, it's pants season. Usually
even the flashers are wearing pants.
I'm not talking about flashers. I'm talking about like I'll wear cargo shorts until it's like 60 degrees, but after 60 degrees, like even I'll put on pants, and I hate pants. Don't you hate pants?
I have anyway, I'm not going to talk about my fantastic Eddie Bauer stretch pants that I have. They're the best things on the planet. I'm not kidding. I own like
I've got
7 pairs now. So
I'm wearing a dope ass pair of like leggings under my pants because that's how fucking cold it is in my house right now. I just want to point that out. Like at least in my living room / dining room, that's how fucking cold it is in my house. It's that I'm wearing 2 layers inside and a hat and a flannel shirt. And yeah, so it's that fucking cold.
Yeah.
And again, if I'm gonna go out on a final thought, fuck everything about the fact that people were made to work outside.
Yes.
Not even being allowed to wear their fucking winter coats, or not even being allowed to wear any kind of winter gear to shovel snow. But
I mean, it's wild to me because I mean, in the state of Alaska, a place that actually properly knows how to deal with cold weather, understandably, is that because I mean, we'll link the article that you're we'll link the Twitter thread and article that you're referencing here, but about the prisoners basically having to shovel and work outside, and the fact that like in Alaska they have fucking snow plows that do the sidewalks.
Wait,
Like,
you have plows that do the sidewalk?
they have little tractors that basically snow blowers or little plows, and they just fucking go along the sidewalk. And that's what they fucking do, because that's what a civilized fucking city like Anchorage, Alaska does. Oh, no. I'm going to do one more. Near around the civics, around the it's not the civic center. I'm trying to remember what. Basically around the main city auditorium, like where they have like conference center stuff, but it's not like a corporate thing. It's the city actually built it. They have heated sidewalks. So
see, we at least have at least there are heat lamps over our public transit here, but
at least you got that over New York City, because New York City doesn't do that.
No, there was this whole thing that happened like 2 weeks ago where some dude was on an L platform, and he was holding his pizza up. He had a slice of pizza and he was holding it up on the heat lamp, and it became a thing on Twitter because people were like, "Yo, this dude's got this shit right," and it turns out it was just a fucking viral marketing campaign. But yeah, it was just some dude who was like, it was some viral marketing campaign. But it's like, yeah, I mean, that's good for that too. But like, out here in the city of Chicago, people who own property are responsible for shoveling their walks.
Yeah.
And I live nearby a giant vacant lot. So the sidewalk around it never gets shoveled. And also the walk, there are a couple of other walks on my way around the neighborhood that have never been shoveled. And more than once, I have slipped and fallen on these, which has caused me personally to go out and shovel these fucking things.
Yep.
Because who the fuck else is going to do it? And it's like, well, why am I even doing this? Like, what? Outside of the fact that I was inconvenienced and nearly broke my fucking ankle and whatever. And yet, we can somehow, the city forgets that, various parts of it exists, but, we were still willing to give away $2 billion to Amazon. So that's what I'll leave you with.
Fun times. So is New York City, even more. And anyway, but you can find me at zdroberts.com, at visu.news, of course. I've got a couple pieces up there recently that I published about Chris Kobach fucking losing finally some shit, because yes.
You're hearing me clapping in the back.
I forgot we talked about this in the last episode. It's usually we have a longer wait, but this has been a short loop. But there was so much what the hell is going on in Chicago breaking news that we had to talk about it. And I'm gonna have a couple more pieces coming up, and also at the end of the week I will be down in Atlanta, not for the Super Bowl, but covering the new white supremacist jamboree at the Stone Mountain thing, which keeps going back and forth on whether it's going to happen or not or whatever. So it may or not happen, but either way, that's where I'll be. But yeah, you can also find me at ZD Roberts on Twitter and Zach D Roberts on Facebook. If you go to that terrible place. So anyway,
good luck with that.
You can subscribe to the visu.news podcast on basically all of your platforms of choice, but we're on Podbean and on Spotify now too, and on iTunes. And if you want to support Aaron Sinek, you can go to patreon.com/Aaron Sinek. You can, if you want to support me, you can support me at I'm just gonna make a joke like you can support anyway, but I'm really cracking up tonight for some reason. You can support me at patreon.com/ZD Roberts. And thanks so much for listening, and y'all have a good night.